Welcome back. Thanks for staying, and thanks for coming. This is a fantastic gathering of people, you and me, all of us together, and we've got such an opportunity today to have some really good conversations. This was my idea, and it might fall completely and utterly flat, in which case I take responsibility for it. I've been, over the years, to many discussions on interfaith, and they're a bit like a YouTube video that I invite you to watch. I know some people have heard this story from me before. My family made a Christmas video in 2008. It's lovely. It is. It brings a tear to your eye. There's all my 4 children, my wife, my brothers, my mother, my father, who'd been divorced for 30 years, having a wonderful time at Christmas, giving each other presents and hugs and smiling and playing instruments. It's fantastic. But we had some issues. And we still do. And we never, ever talk about it. Never. There was a few glimpses, little glimpses of God's grace coming through now, I think, in my family. But that video, you think, isn't the Pratt family lovely? Pratt family, Christmas 2008, if you want to have a look at it, send it to me. And I often found interfaith gatherings were a bit like that. We all love each other, we never have any problems, it's fantastic, yeah. And we have a cup of tea and we eat some food and we go away. Or maybe it's just me that's got some issues and I need to sort myself out. In which case, we'll soon find out in a minute. We thought we'd have there's obviously questions that people have got, or things they'd like us to discuss on a wider basis, and maybe you've not been thinking about them, but you'll have an opportunity in this session before lunch. And we have assembled a distinguished panel of experts on nookie questions. So anything you want to ask these people have been trained internationally, even. Dr. Fuad, Nadiya from
the Cambridge Interfaith programme.
Cambridge Interfaith, I mean, that's auspicious, isn't it? I mean, we're there, aren't we? Marc, celebrated Persian Anglican priest, is that correct?
Yes.
Yep. Sarah, in charge of making peace across a lot of places.
Yeah, Cambridge Interfaith programme as well, Nadiya.
Yeah. And Ismaeel, director of the Lancashire Council of Mosques. So I know some of you have come from across the nation, and we'd love to talk about Lancashire, but we're happy to put anything in place. So here's an opportunity now where you think, actually, I don't know, let's have a discussion about this thing, which has really been on my heart, always been bugging me. If you don't say anything, I'm in for a little bit. Then let's get that discussion going. And we've got a fantastic panel here, but also yourselves. If you're looking intelligent and on the ball, I'll even ask you to join in as well. So that's the offer. Ali has got the other roving mic, so we can make sure we can hear each other, but we're a small gathering. And let's see if we can learn a bit more on some of those areas maybe we've not had the opportunity to speak about. So I'm going to sit down and be quiet for a second and then see what happens. Chris at the back.
I'm Chris Hammond from the University of London. I just wanted to ask the panel, given the fact that you touched on it in thought, on your questions and answers, David Cameron and the coalition has been saying that over Easter that we're a Christian country, and I just wonder what the panel's view of that is. Are we Christian? Are we still a Christian country? And if we are, or if we are not, then what's the impact on community relations with the Prime Minister stressing that we are of a particular religious identity?
It's good. Let's go for it. Anyone willing to put their hand up to this one first before I pick on you? Marc, as our official vicar, Christian rep, Dr. Cameron, Mr. Cameron's talking about. So there you go.
Thank you.
I would say that historically, most definitely, we're a Christian country, and Christianity has influenced our system of law, our system of justice, many of the ways in which we structure our communities and society. Whether or not the current population of Great Britain would wish to own that Christianity is another question. I mean, I think obviously a significant minority do. It's interesting that in census figures, many people still claim to take on that label of being Christian, even though they may not be practicing. A bit like, was it Graham Greene, who we talked about earlier, who said that the Catholic Church is the one he doesn't currently attend. I think there are probably many British people who would say the same thing, that they're non-practicing Christians. I think it's our job as people of faith to encourage the values which Christianity has given to our nation, and I can't speak for my Muslim brothers and sisters, but in my experience, many Muslim friends I have exhibited disappointment that Christians are not more forthright in standing up for their religion and standing up for what they believe. And that's not often the reality that's portrayed in the media, and perhaps that's something that my fellow panelists might want to touch on.
How about an Islamic response? Are we a Christian nation? Ismaeel, let's go.
I think I agree with the last speaker. Traditionally, this country has been Christian. Whether the public consider itself to be Christian actively in the way it was in bygone days is something that's up for debate. It does seem that presently people don't consider themselves to be as Christian as they used to. From a Muslim perspective, and this is something that we discussed at the last Christian-Muslim encounter a couple of months ago, this issue was discussed, and some people did ask this question, and they asked us at the Lancashire Council of Mosques, what do you feel, and how do you feel about this? And one of the things that we mentioned was that the vision of the Lancashire Council of Mosques is that we would like to see Christianity playing a more active role, being a religion that's more in practice, a religion that people actively support. And we also felt at the Lancashire Council of Mosques that sometimes certain things are depicted in the media as being un-Islamic or being sensitive to Muslim concerns, for example, rebranding of Christmas as Winterval, or scrubbing out the nativity play by local councils. And we also discussed this, and one of the things that we mentioned was that a lot of Muslims don't find any issue with Christians practicing their faith or practicing festivals, Christian festivals. And so I think in summary, I think we can say that yes, Christianity isn't as active as it used to be, but a lot of Muslims do feel that yes, they would support, and I'm not speaking quantitatively, but qualitatively from our interaction, they would support Christians being more active in their faith, and there being a more Christian-centric approach to things.
I was just going to add a very small comment. That was that our former Archbishop Rowan said this interesting phrase that we're a post-Christian country, and I was reflecting on what that means, and whether that means we're not Christian anymore, or whether, as I suspect he meant, we are a country who are shaped by Christianity and have moved beyond that. And personally, what I would love to see as we look ahead is that we are a country that is shaped by faith orientation, and in that endeavour the Christian community needs to work more closely with other faith communities, and perhaps one of the champion, if you like, or the other that we're dealing with is actually the secular viewpoint. not in a negative way, but simply in making sure that the faith perspective is at the table on every level.
I mean, just speaking from personal experience, I feel like Christianity is actually a very important part of my growing up. Maybe not actually realising it as a child, but you know, we used to say hymns in school and say grace before we ate, and I spent a significant chunk of my youth hanging out in a cathedral in Gloucester. Partly, you know, more time than I ever did spend in a mosque as a young person, partly because women were not allowed into, or still not allowed into the mosque in the community where I live, separate issue. But it was very much an important part and something which has shaped my understanding of faith generally and relations with my community in Gloucester, where I'm from, and communities where I've lived and studied. And I think Christianity is definitely something that the Christian heritage of the country is something which should be embraced. And I'm in agreement with the panel that you know, seeing a revival, a greater revival in an embrace of the Christian heritage and practicing of faith would be something which would be welcomed by many communities.
Thank you. I disagree with the panel, the whole of them. When a politician starts talking about religion, I get very nervous. I think in the globalized, postmodern world, it's very dangerous to talk about Christian or Muslim country or anything like that. And because then we have to draw equivalences. If Britain is a Christian country, then which country are we talking about is a Muslim country? If being a Muslim country is about the chopping off of hands and corporal punishment, then that's not what I call a Muslim country. And if Christianity is going back to medieval times and burning people on the stakes, that's not all. I think the issue about the world we live in is that I find myself in Britain that part of those people who really seem to have a problem with Islam, it's got nothing with actually Islam itself, but people find it difficult because they think Islam has been used to bring religion back into public life and that it is the culprit. This society has struggled over years. It has made a lot of sacrifices to keep a public space away from the fanaticism of religion. And I'm talking about religion as a whole because it does tend to beg on that. So I think we need all of us to go back to the drawing board and first define what we talk about a Christian and what is a Muslim, because how back you're going to go or how forward are we prepared to look into this globalist kind of world. And this is why I'm very happy to be in Britain, because this is the ideal spot on which such kind of debates can take place, and this is why we're here talking about it. I'm a lapsed Christian Catholic. I spent 12 years of my education in a Jesuit school. My Latin is better than my Arabic, and I did more Hail Marys than Salawats in my early life. So I'm a walking epitome of interfaith. And I find no contradiction in do because I'm at ease about the thing. So I think what we need to bring up is this: I'll defend the non-religiosity of public space, because I think that there's a lot of room for religion in life, but I think it should be in a context. And one of my biggest worries in this country is the growth of the interfaith industry, but I'll talk about that later.
It's always nice to be encouraged in your faith by your Muslim friends, isn't it? Get to be more Christian, you lot. So, yeah, thank you. Have we got some others? Duncan, and then our friend here. Thank you.
I'd just like to ask the panel, both Christians and Muslims proselytise. And I know that some Christians try to convert Muslims, and some Muslims try to convert Christians. How is this going to affect our Christian-Muslim dialogue?
Okay, who fancies a piece of that? I mean, I'd like to join in with that, saying I have a number of friends who've converted either from being a Muslim to a Christian or from being a Christian to a Muslim. And I've found Muslim friends who converted to being Christians, most of them have had a really tough time. So I wonder if anyone could join into that one. Who fancies that one first? Sarah, will you hand up first?
Again, I'm going to say a short comment. It's often, I lead a program called Scriptural Reasoning, where we read scripture side by side. One of the things I often say to people is that you can't ask people to hang up their evangelistic heart at the door and walk in to a neutral, so-called neutral space and pretend that they don't long for their neighbour to be Muslim or to be Christian if that's what their heart leads them towards. So I personally think that there are spaces in which proselytizing is not to be encouraged and not appropriate because it can make people feel unsafe, but I don't think we can ask people to change their hearts.
Or suspend their hearts is better than it.
I think I probably have felt like you do very much in the past and to some extent do in the present. But what I would say is that, as the professor pointed out to us at the beginning of his lecture, I think 9/11 kind of changed the goalposts for everyone, because we were confronted with our own ignorance about other faiths, whether that be Christian, Muslim, Muslim, Christian, or other faiths entirely. We were presented with the absolute necessity, the absolute need to actually not necessarily agree with other faith communities, but understand them more fully and understand what their concerns are, understand where they're coming from, understand the reality and the basis, the history of their beliefs and why they believe them. And I think that is a tremendously important thing. And I think in the current context, what I get from this is the importance of, yes, we do need to evangelize or proselytize as part of our obligations as faith communities, but we also need to learn to peacefully coexist. And we also need to learn to recognize the strengths that we have and the strengths that the other communities have. I can honestly say that understanding more about Islam in recent years has enabled me to be a better Christian. I am inspired by the regular discipline of prayer, the idea that people think very carefully about the way they behave and why they behave that way. Eating the right kinds of foods, treating your neighbor with respect. These are all common values, but they're expressed in different ways. And I think understanding Islam can enable us as Christians to actually be better Christians by learning from the disciplines and the practices that can deepen our spirituality and draw us closer to the God that we both believe in and worship. When we say God the Father, and when my Muslim friends say Allah, we're talking about the same God. There's one God. We're monotheistic religions, both of us. And if we can learn to worship the one God with a greater sense of spirituality, a greater depth, a greater understanding of being able to love God and love our neighbor, and learn from the traditions of others, then we become better Muslims, we become better Christians, without compromising the unique beliefs that we hold as individual faiths. Dr. Fuad, you wanted to come in? Sorry.
In 1998, I wrote an article called Interfaith, the New Ostrich Religion. And as a reward for it, I was called in by the then Archbishop Curry and appointed to this Christian Muslim listening group, which ended up in the formation of the Christian Muslim Forum. And you, Professor Gordon, mentioned David Marshall, Michael Grave, Bishop John Austin and stuff. And the idea was to go up and down the country and speak to Christian and Muslim groups to see what they really needed. So we went to about 1,500 individual groups over a period of 4 years. Strangely enough, it opened my eyes a lot to the variety of Christians that are there out. And I'll be honest, the ones that really impressed me were the evangelicals. Because once we sat in the room, it's like two heavyweight fighters. We're just trying to suss each other out and see who's going to be. I just saw a reflection of a lot of my Muslim brothers in there. So I decided a long time ago, considering then it was the 9/11 came up, the amount of suicide bombers were claiming they were doing it because they wanted to go to paradise, and the status of the new Muslim or the convert. I thought, I'm very unlikely, I can't convert, I'm already a Muslim. And the second thing is, I'm not going to blow myself up because that's not my thing. And I thought, if this goes on, my worry was, if I converted anybody, I was reducing my chances of getting 72 virgins. So I stopped trying to convert anybody to become a Muslim a long time ago. And I think this is the issue about confrontation. I think the idea is, we want to dialogue before encountering each other. And this is a position that I don't know how many of us have been honestly sitting in front of somebody. My best memories of Interfaith was the late Bishop John Austin, who was the Bishop for Aston in Birmingham, to take him to a Darul Uloom in Leicester. And he came in his full gear, I told him. So he came in front of the students and stood in front of them, sit down. And these people who are training to be imams has never seen a Christian close. And I told him to just stay. So he said, my name is John Austin, I'm a Christian, and this is what I believe. And I think this is the first step that to get rid out of those cobwebs of people being confident. I think this is the issue, it's about confidence. Now, I don't know what happens in modernity, but it seems most of us seem to get confidence by taking away the confidentiality of the other person, rather than centering ourselves in terms of God. So I think for people who talk about interfaith, it's about positioning yourself first, and then seeing others how they can position about you, rather than. I don't believe anybody who wants to get interfaith and doesn't want the other person to change or convince themselves into that in the situation. So it is a problematic thing, but it's more problematic than in other parts. I come from Kenya, and we talk about, it's one of the fault zones about the conflict going on, Boko Haram in Nigeria and stuff like that. It's exactly this. When you go there and you open a school or something like that, and you put a cross in the middle and you take the orphan children because people are dying of starvation, people react. This school where these women, the girls were taken from, is a similar kind of situation. So things just don't happen like that, you see. We need to sit and have this. There is already a code of ethics on how to operate in the other area. Sorry, I'm speaking more than I need, but I think we need to get into dialogue, but post or just try to avoid this conversion, which is, again, I don't know. Because if I really believe, this is the irony, that Islam is good and is the best, then you would wish it for the person that you like.
Ismaeel, why do, I mean, my experience is Muslims becoming Christians have a tough time. Why is that?
Muslims, I think that's a bit of a, we moved away from the questions from the floor, but I can see where you're coming from, and it does take place. We do come across it that Christians or people of other faith who accept Islam do at times, from members of the faith, from members of within a Muslim community, experience some difficulties. And I think the answer probably lies in the concluding remarks by my respected elder Fuad, who mentioned that if you experience something good, then you'd wish it for the other person. And it's that vigour and rigour with which people of the Muslim faith who are actively Muslim, and they feel that they've got something very good and they wish it for the other, and that wish and hope and desire at times probably go slightly extreme, tips the balance slightly, or a great deal, and results in mistreatment of other individuals. Whether that's the correct thing or not, whether one should deal with that or not, or whether one should actually deal with people who've left the Islamic faith or left the Islamic faith for another religion, and whether one should deal with them in such a way, that's something that needs to be discussed, and different issues, different situations need to be dealt with in a different way. And I think the Sufi way of love and compassion and reasoning and understanding and ensuring there's rapport between an individual and another individual is probably the better way of dealing with such situations. The other way of being harsh and cold, I think that's probably more counterproductive. And when you live in a country like this, where people are free to think, free to believe, I think building rapport and relationship probably is more fruitful than any other harsh way.
Thank you. You want to come in for a step?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment that I'm Paul Samuel after co-director of the association. Maybe I'd just like to make maybe I'd just like to make a comment. I think it depends a lot on culture regarding this question, because it's like you're not really going to find in somewhere like Turkey that if someone becomes a Christian from a Muslim family, the people probably wouldn't even bat an eye at them, so well, good for you. You know, whereas on the other hand, in another country where there's a very, very sort of almost tribal connection with Islam, and it is part of the tribal identity, then I use the word tribal, it's probably not the best word, but if you know what I'm saying, it's very ingrained in the culture. And so when someone leaves Islam, then it's seen almost like they're abandoning the tribe and they're betraying the tribe. So this is a very cultural thing, I think, personally. I'm a Muslim myself, and it doesn't, I don't see, if someone from a Muslim background becomes a Christian, I wouldn't see that in any way as being a problem in the way that I should treat them. I should treat them properly. I mean, I've got 2 daughters. I don't know what religious path they will take when they're older. And of course, I would like them to be inspired by what I believe, but if they chose something else, I would still love them as my daughters. I couldn't consider for one moment turning my back on them.
Peter, is it still on this same subject that just commenting? We'll just take one while I come to yourself.
Hi, I'm Peter Boardman. I'm a Preston resident. I just want to quote something from Václav Havel, the first president of the Czech Republic, a philosopher. And he said, "Keep the company of those who seek the truth and run away from those who have found it."
Thanks very much. Hi, I'm Eddie from the Dwell Project. My question is, a UN report recently revealed that sexism is rife in the UK. 1 in 4 women suffer domestic violence in the UK. Christianity and Islam are often seen as root causes of gender inequality in a lot of feminist circles. So my question is, what aspects of our faith support equality between men and women? And what do you think the advantages are of addressing violence against women together across faith groups? And my question is for the men and the women.
Anybody want to go first? Sarah, come on.
I'll always be the first.
Yeah.
I could talk to the end of life on this one, but just a few thoughts. I come from a traditional church background where women are not ordained, So I grew up in a conservative evangelical context where all the men in my family practically are ordained, and the women in my family, on the whole, are missionaries. So that's the kind of background that I come from. The view I was taught, and I still hold actually, about men and women is the complementarity view, where we don't need to be equal, we do need to complement each other, and we are equally valued, and we have an equal dignity in life. So that's my position, which is probably by many considered to be fairly old-fashioned, but I retain that. And I was going to say something else, but about violence. I absolutely condemn violence towards any human being, women or male. So, simple.
With regards to domestic violence, I think the Islamic faith is very clear on what it says about how to treat women, and with regards to domestic violence, the Prophet ﷺ is mentioned in the hadith, he never hit or struck a woman. Likewise, there's many texts, and I think a lot of texts that deal with this particular issue about domestic violence. So the faith is very, very clear on domestic violence. And when a nikah takes place, when a Muslim man and a woman are married, and the nikah takes place, the sunnah is that the way of the Prophet is that he would often recite 3 particular verses from the Holy Quran. And when you look at these 3 verses, the theme that runs concurrently throughout these 3 verses is the issue of taqwa, fear of God. There's many verses in the Holy Quran which deal with husband and wife relations, but the question arises, and the ulama of Islam often mention, that why is it that these particular 3 verses that discuss taqwa, the fear of God, is mentioned at this particular point in time, and the subconscious message that's being conveyed to the listeners, not just to the person getting married, but to other people who are actually sitting there, is that the relationship is one in which one should always be totally conscious and aware of God's presence, and that in your dealings and the way you deal with your spouse and those people that your children, the subordinates, one's servants, that one deals with the fear of God, that yes, Allah Almighty, or God Almighty, is watching me, listening to me, hearing me, and He's with me at all times. And the way I deal with these individuals, the way I deal with my wife, with my children, should be one of compassion, rahmah, and mercy. And when you look at the Prophet's life, and as Muslims we say, we often mention that لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ, that inside the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, there was an extremely lofty example. And when you see his life, the way he dealt with his women folk, and this is something that the ulama of Islam often mention, that the way to treat one's children, one's wives, etc., should be the way that Prophet, peace and blessings, treated them. And when you look at his life was one of compassion, mercy. So when you look at the corpus of Islamic literature, we find that domestic violence, harshness, isn't sanctioned in the faith. But the question then arises, why is it that, yes, we do hear of Muslims committing certain acts towards their women folk? And I think the answer probably lies in a cultural understanding or cultural approach in muamalat, in dealing with one's wives. And that's something that should be eradicated, should be removed, and something that the faith doesn't accept or encourage.
I wonder if there's something about the primacy of our religions where we put men above women, though, in many cases, whether it's our priests, ministers, vicars, imams. Does that mix in this sort of who's got the power, who hasn't got the power?
I think that has been a key element in the way history and religion have influenced each other. I would say I come from a probably more liberal perspective on the Christian spectrum. I would say, for my own personal beliefs, would be rooted in the belief that the humanity of Christ is what influences Christians to behave a certain way in the world, and that our faith, from the Anglican perspective, is one in which our formularies say that we are called to proclaim the faith afresh in each generation. And that's not to mean that we compromise our core Christian beliefs, but we try and discern, with the help of the Holy Spirit and with the help of our relationships with our brothers and sisters, how we can have the most positive influence in loving our neighbours. Marriage is a key example of the way that has evolved over the centuries. Marriage used to be an issue of property, of women being owned by men. It is now viewed in our current society, and particularly within a Christian context, it's viewed as a partnership between two equals. That is something that has changed over the years, and so beliefs do evolve to reflect the core values of a community. That's not to say we should compromise in any way the uniqueness of our core Christian beliefs, the divinity of Christ, and the many ways in which our Christian beliefs influence us. But we do have to recognize that society and history do have an influence on the way faith and doctrines can evolve.
Nadiya, you mentioned not being allowed in the mosques for prayer time. Is that part of that power complex?
I definitely think so. I think in the history of Islam and what I know, and actually we have an expert here in Islam and gender relations, Shuruq, who I think is running a workshop later, so I would encourage anyone who has specific and detailed questions to go to her. But yeah, I think there is a rich history of women being involved in public life and being very much an active part of the Muslim communities and of Islamic teaching and learning, and this is something which has been very, very sadly lost and taken over by cultural. I can only assume that it's cultural, patriarchal values which, you know, state that women should remain in the home, that they shouldn't necessarily have access, or should only have access to knowledge up to a certain point, shouldn't pursue education beyond a certain age or after marriage, and it's sad. I hope, my hope is for the British Muslim community that we are remain in a questioning mode and remain open to Muslim women becoming a more integrated part of the Muslim public sphere. You know, you can't have a community progressing if 50% of that population are locked in cupboards, and you know, these silly stereotypes which we have. There's a film, Four Lions, where there's this scene. I remember this guy is saying to his brother or friend that you keep your women locked in a cupboard. You know, and so, unfortunately, that is the state of some of the mosque facilities which we do have for women, which is that they are physically just really in a poor state, when that is even when they are there. On the issue of sexism more broadly, I would say that it is a global social phenomenon that we need to come to terms with, and I think one of the biggest facets of sexism which we face right now as a global community is the reduction of women to the sexual dimension and the objectification of women. And to that, I think that personally I see the answer as being very much rooted in faith, being rooted in Islam, men and women being told to lower their gaze, to carry yourself with modesty, and to respect another person for their humanity, and to see each other as equals in piety and in mind.
I think we're trying to bring faith into disrepute here. it is an issue, but to talk about Christianity and Muslim is not. I used to cover the countries under the communist rules in the late 70s and most of the 80s. And Russian men used to bang, they had nothing to do with religion or anything in Albania, in China today. So it's all about how societies work the relationship. It's got about economic relationship, it's got about things. But in terms of faith, this is one, I think, one of the areas that interfaith can really work together is, I think, the ideals of both Christianity and Islam in terms of the treatment of women and stuff. There's nothing wrong. They need to work together and perhaps come up with some kind of shared agenda. It's about education. Islam, like my younger brother said, that it's against domestic violence, but the reality is Muslim men beat their wives, they abuse their women, and it is not order, it's an endemic. And it is a social problem, but the issue is how are we going to deal with it? There is no systematic, it's just this sporadic kind of things that people talk about. I think some of the things that Muslim women think, or other people who are trying to help them, like, I don't see the reason why you want to go into the mosque. Mosques are zoos, they are circuses. I'm a man and I go to the mosque and I can't stand the abuse and the thing. Why you want to come to the mosque? It's the last place you want to come and do anything. Create a space where you can make more equality, outer space. Because in this country we are reinventing a lot of things, including, you hear about imams. Where I come from, there's no imam. The imam is the one who led the prayer mosque, and there's a sheikh who is educated to give fatwa. Here you've got a specialized imam who opens the mosque, lead the prayers, after prayers he closes. A professional thing that is being done. And mosques are not places for socializing and interacting. You can talk about the world. There's no mosque. I've lived in Africa, I've lived in Asia and stuff like that. You go, there are social centers, you do different kind of things. So we have to rethink about it. And it's good that young girls like Nadiya and them need to think, but they need to think out of the box. It's not about confrontation, it's about all the time negotiating. And you know what, I always tell my wife, we have a 23-year-old son who, I'm very surprised because Nadiya says, oh, I know your son, so I don't know what he's been up to behind my back. So it's like I'm not a violent person carrying up steep, because that's the thing. But we're very bad in bringing up our children, our sons. We don't bring them to being good husbands, we spoil them right from this week. My daughter knows instinctively that she's got to go to the kitchen, clean the place, but my son, he gets away with it. So it's a whole collective kind of cultural shift that has to be done. And these verses and things is good. I always talk to amongst ourselves, for both Christian, Muslims and others. It's nice to have these lofty ideals, but in the practicalities of it, that is what is needed. In Singapore, where I've been based for the last 3 or 4 years, it's very good. They have pre-marriage classes. Now, you don't get married till you go through a 6 weeks course intensive and you pass. And it's about how to know to treat. The only thing I don't agree is how to treat your in-laws, because I think they deserve whatever you give them. But that's I think there's something like that needed to be changed.
The good news is Ali's given me the nod, like this, to say there's some fantastic food ready. But before that,
10 minutes.
It's 10 minutes. We're going to have 1, 2, 3. We've got 3? 1, 2, 3. Great, okay.
We take all 3 together and then...
Yeah, let's go for all 3.
Okay. Right, I just wanted to make a suggestion, and my suggestion is that the elephant in this room is actually something that is common to both Christianity and the Muslim religion. And the elephant in the room is the word that's been bandied about a lot, and it's the word faith. It's one of the things that both religions have in common, because both religions and people who are in those religions talk about it and they obviously mean the faith in different ways. But the word faith, I think, despite being in common between the two religions, is one of the biggest obstacles, I think, in religious life and the place of religion in the world. Professor Goddard will recognize this quote I'm going to read out. The opposite of faith is not doubt. It is certainty. Where you have certainty, you don't need faith. Faith, by definition, always implies doubt. There can be something admirable, something worth doing in the decision to believe, but it never gives us certainties. And I think that's the problem, and it's one of the big problems, and I think it's the elephant in this room. People keep talking about faith. Faith is not about certainty. And if people of different religions recognize the fact that they're living in doubt, because if they were certain, they wouldn't need faith. And if there's doubt, there's room for interpretation. And if there's room for interpretation and there's room for doubt, there's room for other views. And I think this should be one of the central planks of any kind of dialogue between religions. I think faith is a big problem, the way it's ordinarily understood.
Okay, so should we rename faith doubt?
Yeah, you'll know the quote.
Yeah. Thank you. My name's Bruce Brown. Mine is actually follows on from that a little bit, but I have recently sort of encountered, or in latter years of my life, I've come into contact with evangelical Christians, and what's quite fascinating, and I wonder if this is something that prominent Christian leaders have to address, and that is this: a lot of evangelical Christians do not believe that the God of Muslims, Allah, is the same God as the God of Christ. They actually, you've gone to Twitter, is regarded as Satan, blah, blah, blah. There was an interesting question I saw on Twitter the other day. Now, what word of God would Jesus have used to express, to refer to God? And clearly he would have used something that's alliteratively similar to Allah or Elohi or something like that. It clearly is the same God, but I think a lot of Christians, a number of Christians do have that problem, and I wonder if that's something that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. And the last question, here we can
Thank you, Ali. Just getting back to the gender question. I mean, sorry to get back to that, but I mean, you do hear a lot of polemics about, our respective faith traditions holding women in high esteem and this, against violence and whatnot, and this kind of this high value with that women are held in or whatever, and then against violence and whatnot, and then there's also this acknowledgement on the part of Fuad that yes, domestic violence does happen, and we have all kinds. It also happens within the Christian tradition, but also getting back to the original question, which was there are places that there's a lot of research that is happening that is looking at, like Carmel Wellness based in Birmingham, I believe, and others that acknowledge that a lot of times religions are used as an excuse, and our scriptures are used as an excuse to carry out domestic violence, and are used as an excuse to prevent women from having roles within society, and that we as people of faith, of whatever tradition, we need to stand up to those kind of views and be active about it, not just say, well, no, we don't have that, what you're talking about is mistaken. We actually need to be proactive in what we're doing to ensure that there is a kind of gender equality, maybe getting back to some of the human rights issues that were mentioned earlier. There's research that's being done by the UN and by World Economic Forums all over the world that acknowledge that if you include women in all levels of negotiation, the levels of economic well-being, of education and health, improve for everybody, for men as well as for women. If you include women at all levels of negotiation with regard to peace and post-conflict resolution, then you're more likely to have a longer lasting peace. So I think what I'm asking here is that we as people of faith are more proactive in what we're doing about gender, not just complain. And I mean, I would go along with Fuad, is let's think outside the box, let's move sideways, let's be a bit more creative in what we're doing and be proactive and not just defensive. Oh, sorry, I'm Bonnie Evans-Hills, I'm based in Leicester.
Great, so 3 questions. Let me see if I can just summarise these. One was, is faith the issue? Is it doubt? Is faith actually causing using that? Is it more of a problem to us? The gender question.
God of Islam and God of Christianity.
God of Islam. Is it 2 different gods? Is there 3? Are there lots of them knocking around? Who fancies that first big one about is faith? Should we rename faith doubt? Anybody fancy that one? Go.
If I can just give a personal reflection, I think faith is a journey. It's not a kind of like a thing. It's a journey, and there is a constant searching. Personal experience, again, I can speak from, but I think a lot of people also share this. That it's a constant searching and questioning and reflecting, and there is doubt always comes into it. But then you're kind of seeking the answer, and it's only through that critical approach to faith, really, that I have found, or it's mainly through that critical approach to faith that I have found closeness to God.
The certainty in Islam, I think Maulana Salim can perhaps help us out, is in all the classic Islamic texts, all the scholars have commented on yaqeen. This is certainty. Certainty is the basis of religion. There's always doubt. It's actually, some scholars believe doubt is what makes you a better Muslim, because if you have arrived at the journey, there's no more you need to go. So this questioning and stuff. But we live in areas, in times where everybody's, some people, most of people in my core religious talk as if they've arrived in heaven and you're the one who's struggling. This is called takfir, and they make judgment. And I'm so glad that God is great that they don't have the keys to that heaven, because most of us will be blocked out. And this is where the problem starts about extremism, because that flexibility has been taken away from faith. And I think it's the lack of confidence, is the insecurity of this. I'll tell you something, big crisis happening in a country like Saudi Arabia. In the 60s and 70s, a lot of Saudi Arabia young people got good scholarships to go and study in America and stuff, where they were in heaven. They had the money to spend on women, drink and stuff. Then they came back, suddenly they feel guilty about what they've done. So they think religion is there to punish themselves, and so they bring these wrong faces. So now what has become, fortunately for religion, is Islam is a long list of don't do's. Nobody remembers again what you're supposed to do. So imagine if you're a young Muslim person, it's really boring. No sex, no drugs, no rock and roll. What are you going to do? You got 24 hours still out there. This is a real crisis that is facing. So this whole idea about how we present religion, not in terms of concrete certainties that this is no. And we never allow anybody to go through a journey of traveling. There's no questioning to talk. And you know why? Because most of the parenting skills are transferable. I grew up where everybody spoke like me, he thought like me, and did like this. Then suddenly my son goes to a school in London. He's got people from 15 nationalities in his class, from 7 faiths. He comes, and that time Tony Blair was being elected. He said, oh, is Tony Blair a saint, And I have to come up with some kind of answer, because this is the image that is created. He comes out, he says that so-and-so's parents are gay. So you know what you do? You got 3 options. You tell him to shut up and not ask that question, because you don't know how to answer it. You lose your authority. Or you say you don't know, you lose your authority even more. or you resort to the third but most viable option is let's go and ask Sheikh Google, you know. But how many minutes can you spend on that? So that's a very good question. I think it's for all faith, that we put processes in all other ways of seeking knowledge, but when it comes to faith, it's a matter of strict kind of things.
So, can you answer the evangelical question? Have we got a separate God for us? A better one or a worse one? How's it go?
Great. And just before that, can I just add one more thing to the previous conversation, and then I'll speak to that. And that is to move on from having grown up in a very conservative evangelical home. I did move on. One of the things I observed was that dogma took the place of a search for truth. And what that caused was disunity in my own community, let alone with the other communities. So one of the things we really encourage in our work at the Cambridge Interfaith Programme, and what we're doing up at Rose Castle and elsewhere, is a questioning approach. And I think that's a wonderful way to engage with one another, to be vulnerable enough to bring our questions, the questions that we grapple with within our own community, and to share those with other communities, not just the questions we have about their community. So that was a reflection on that. In terms of the gods, yeah, I grew up in a world where the Muslim God was absolutely not the Christian God. The Christian God is a Trinitarian God, and the Muslim God is not. Of course, I don't believe that, and that is because I spent an awful lot of time living in Muslim communities. I was an anthropologist before I was a theologian, and it was actually through experience that I realized that these neighbors of mine were worshipping the same God. And the way in which we understand God, the way in which we understand faith, or doubt or whatever, the way in which we understand worship, the way in which we understand scripture, all these things are really different, but we are trying to worship the same God, in my humble opinion.
I'd like to bring Rev'd Nadim into the conversation as well.
Just give me 2 minutes to challenge you all. Because I need a pen. Anyway, about the God. 98% of us are even ignorant about the word. Jesus said on the last prayer, Ilahi, Ilahi, Ili, Ili, right? Lama sabaktani. This is Syriac or Assyrian. I come from Syria. So I speak Arabic and I speak English a little bit. So, Ili, that's what Jesus used, right? What did the Hebrews, the Jews, use? Il. How do we know that? Because all the names, all the Hebrew names end with Il. Michael, Mikael. Jibrail, Gabriel is Jibrail. Ismaeel is Ismaeel, Il at the end. So Il, Ili, and Ilah in Arabic are the same word. Ilah means in Arabic a God with a small g. Right? So, Ili, which Jesus used, Ilah with the Arabic word, a God, they all come from Il. What was Il in the past? It was the chief Syrian god. It was like Baal. It was like Ishtar. It was the big boy in Syria. So the Hebrews or the Jews borrowed the word Il because they couldn't utter the word what? Yahweh. So they couldn't say Yahweh. They wanted a name for God. They brought Il. So, and they used not only Il, they used Elohim. And what is Elohim? It's the plural of Il. The im at the end in Arabic and in Hebrew is the plural of Il, Elohim. So, Ilah, the Arabs, when the monotheistic religion came to Arabia, not Islam, even before Islam, Ilah was, the Arabs wanted to define the God, the only God. So they brought the definite article. What is the definite article in Arabic? Al. It's Al. So it becomes Al-Ilah. And from Al-Ilah, we have the word Allah. Simply, we have the same origin. Il, Ili, Ilah, Allah. Whether we are Christians, whether we are Jews, whether we are Muslims, we are talking about the same origin. Well, the media is dividing us. Because when the media wants to talk about Islam, they switch immediately to Allah. And when they want to speak about Christianity or Judaism or whatever, they switch to God. What about me in the Middle East? I used Allah. I don't use God, G-O-D. I use Allah. So whatever we want to define uniquely our experience with Ili or Elohim or Il, it's up to us. But at the root of it, let's not kid ourselves. We are talking about the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have overrun a bit. Bonnie, will you forgive us if we cut to some lunch now, please? A number of people have had the opportunity to speak. You're now going to have lunch, and obviously you're going to talk to one another, and then you're going to go into, hopefully, you're going to go into some workshops where everyone will have the opportunity to talk and discuss. If I could ask you, because I know there are some groups here who tended to just stick together a little bit, maybe you could spread your influence with one another and talk to some people you've not come across. That would be even better for all of us. So, Ali, lunch is ready?
Ready, yes.
This fantastic wrap up for us. Thank you.